Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Pumpkinhead. I figured that this was probably going to be the perfect movie to review on Halloween. Plus, really, when also looking at it, I've never seen this movie, so I thought that this would be like kind of a really good thing to finally get another like movie that I've never seen before, and so that would just be cool. So this movie is to go on and I think have a number of sequels, so that's really interesting. Like I think at some points I had probably gone on and accidentally seen one of the sequels of this movie, but not quite sure. But so, what is the original Pumpkinhead movie about? So, come to find out, we go on and find out that this movie is about revenge. I've never gone on and rooted for a monster more than I have probably in this film. Because, of course, like when looking at all those slasher films in the later movies, you start to root for Jason or Freddy or whoever, anyways, instead of whoever is the teens. You don't really care about them because at some point, like their backstories aren't all that well thought out, and so you're just hoping that they all die because a lot of them have stupid things about them. They're just like, hey, if you want to kill this person off, I am okay about that. So, with that said, we have this film where we have a guy named Ed who it seems is to leave his grocery store to tell his little son Billy to stay inside the store, and Billy does not go on and do so because of a dog named Gypsy. So Billy is to be chasing after this dog to accidentally uh, have himself get killed, which then leads Ed rushing back to find his son who is dead, to then want to seek revenge on these teens. And we, of course, have Ed who lashes out by having a witch conjure up this Pumpkinhead. And so the Pumpkinhead goes after all these teens, kills all of them off. And so the only weak thing about this movie is obviously the kills. The most important, crucial thing about this movie, how people are to go on and die. And most of this movie has really weak kills. Most of them are just either being dragged off screen or getting kind of flung from a high distance or a high height. Because we have to naturally assume that Pumpkinhead is going into every single one of these trees and dropping people off to kill them, and that's how they die. And I'm like, it seems like a lot of effort to go on and do to kill people off when really you could have you could easily just have crushed them, or you could have gone on any number of routes. And so with that said, hopefully I'm going to go on and cover all the deaths and kills and whatever, because normally I forget about one person at some point who dies in a group filled movie. So, with that said, I think that is pretty much teeing it up because this movie is very thin and very light, and it's also just kind of like a rush to get to the very little backstory that anybody is to really matter in this movie because it's like an 86-minute film. Not even an 88-minute film, an 86-minute film with credits. So, with that said, this movie is to be a okay film. I'm kind of interested in possibly the franchise to see if this original movie is going to be the best out of the franchise. Because I'm sure limited quality is probably going to be within sequels. So for those of you that have gone on into the Pumpkinhead franchise, we're like, oh no, I liked only original and that was it. All the other ones sucked. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's good because then I won't go on and see what the other sequels provide. But more likely, I could probably just watch a trailer and just be like, yeah, all the other movies are crap. I didn't go into them. I think there was one Pumpkinhead movie that I saw that had to deal with two families that were kind of been bickering in the town for the longest time, and they don't even remember what they're arguing about anymore, but they've just been arguing. And so a Pumpkinhead, for some reason, ends up getting unleashed into this kind of Romeo and Juliet kind of story between these two families to hope that these two kids are going to go on and get married and have this finally resolve itself, but it doesn't because Pumpkinhead ends up getting unleashed. So we, from whichever one that is, let me know in the comments below because I'm not quite sure, even if that is a Pumpkinhead movie. It's been such a long time, but I remember it possibly being that, but still. So, so let's go on and let's just go into spoilers because I've kind of already teed up this movie. Again, it being very thin, there's not much that I can state. So, with that said, let's go on into state an okay movie at the end of the day. Would give this a thumbs up uh, because I liked the monster, even though the kill parts were ugh. But so it was an okay at the end of the day film. Where can you go on and see this movie? Well, if you have AMC Plus, I would check that out. AMC Plus tends to have a lot of really good films, really good shows. The Walking Dead, but also Pumpkinhead. So, where can you also see this movie? Of course, through a number of apps that I've used for a long stretch of time here. The first one, of course, would be Doxy. Doxcy. You can go through a Google Play Store, find this app, and hopefully download it and be able to say that you can see a lot of things for absolutely free. I've been going on and watching Quantum Leap and Chucky and a number of other shows that you know would have to be able to have you go through specific apps to go on and get them and see them and whatever. I can see them for free on Doxy. The next apps that would go on that lesser in its accessibility at some points, but still you could probably find them. An app called Play UHD. So those are two words. Play and then UHD are two separate words. That would have you search them together. So you'll find an app that has Fox HD movies as its logo, and go ahead and download that and be able to say that you can see a lot of things for absolutely free. Next off, an app called 123 Movies. The logo I think has gold lettering, I think, or gold numbering, I think, in the logo, because you'll have to find the right 123 Movies, because of course a number of these apps are to all go on and either have not good servers or not good content access. So you'll have to find the right 123 Movies. When you do, you'll go through to see a film for absolutely free. Hopefully it's Pumpkinhead. So, and then lastly, Yes Movies. If Yes Movies, the Google Play Store version doesn't work, there probably is going to be an equivalent to that if you go and search Yes Movies. So that might just pan out somehow or another. But so, anyways, I think it's about that time to just double five this bad boy up. Go through also a Google search to find Yes Movies. That might work out also. So I think it's about that time to again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to get into spoil this movie. The thing that I like about it most is that this is a revenge movie. That's what easily wins me over. I like revenge films. I like there is to be like this whole grudge and like this monster isn't just willy-nilly going out. There's a whole motivation behind it. So with that said, in the beginning of this movie, we have the Harley families and or this Harley family, and they are getting ready for bed tonight. We have Tom and Ellie and Eddie, who are all just kind of like, hey, let's get ready for bed. We have Tom, who is to realize that there is a knock on the door by a guy named Clayton. Clayton, it seems, is desperate to want to get inside to seek out shelter because there's something coming after him. Tom, holding a gun to the door, is to tell Clayton to go away because whatever is going to come after him is going to come after them, and he can't risk killing off his family just to save Clayton. So the monster ends up coming for Clayton. Clayton runs off. Eddie runs to the window to see Clayton just in time getting killed by Pumpkinhead. So This, of course, was 1957. Now we push on to present day. Eddie, who is now Ed, is much older. He has a son named Billy. And so Billy is going on and playing with this dog, as we, of course, have Ed, who is kind of flame throwing possible weeds in his farm, and trying to uh, go on and get all of his farm stuff ready. So Ed is to have Billy come inside so that way they can have a meal. Billy seems to try to feed the dog just straight from the table, and Ed's like, no, like just put it in his bowl. So Billy ends up getting fed a story from Ed, and so the next thing we know, both Ed and Billy are going off later on to go to their grocery store to open it up for the day. So we have Billy and Ed who are kind of putting water to the produce to keep it fresh, and are to kind of take this tarp off this cooler. So we have this grocery store opening for business. So we see these two cars driving along with these teens. So we have Joel, who's driving with Kim in his car, and he's drinking and driving right in the car. So we have in the other car where we have Steve convincing all the other girls that Joel is a really good guy. Yeah, like he's drinking and driving, but he's a good guy. Sure, he is. So we have these teens go on and stop by this grocery to buy a bunch of groceries. We have Joel and Steve that get into these motorcycles and they realize how open this place is. So we have both Joel and Steve who are just kind of doing their dirt bikes, having fun because they have nothing better to do. So we also had the Wallace family that arrives, and all of them look like dirt because literally they like head to toe, like their hair is dirty, like their face is dirty, and I probably look just like them every single day of the week. So it's great. So he's such a dirty boy. Yeah, I am. Anyways, so uh, we go on to find out within this cast, the guy who ends up playing Chris in this movie is to actually have been the young Clark Kent in the original like Superman movies, and he ends up doing the scene where he's like running along next to the train, and a young Lois Lane spots Clark Kent running alongside the train, and the mother's like, "Wow, Lois, you have a really good active imagination that'll maybe like help you in the future," which it will. So so yeah, so Chris was to go on and play Clark Kent, so that's kind of cool. And so we also find that one of the Wallace kids is actually Mayhem uh, Balick or Bialik. I'm gonna go with Balick. And so Mayhem is actually, if you guys do not know, is actually Blossom from the show Blossom, or is to have also been in The Big Bang Theory as Amy Farrah Fowler, or was to also get another show I think called Call Me Kat somewhere down the road, and she was to be the lead in that show. I think that's what the show was called. I don't know. I don't know much current shows very often. So uh, so she is one of the Wallace kids. So we have all these Wallace kids coming out of the truck. We have Wallace who, after we have one of the teens who's going on and asking Ed, like, well, hey, do you have any beer? And Ed's like, no, we don't have any beer. It's like, well, of course not, because this guy doesn't want to deal with underage teens, and plus also like he doesn't want to deal with the headache of having to consistently stock beer, because of course a lot of this is just stuff that he has just grown off the farm. So, and plus also that would have to be a very specific vendor. You'd probably have to get a liquor license. It's a whole thing. So we go on to have Mr. Wallace, who's asking for not only all of his groceries, but then is also asking for feed that he needs. Ed is to realize, oh my god, like I forgot it at home. So here's the thing, like I'm gonna have to go and pick this up. So how about I drop this off at your home? And Wallace is like, great. Like I'm willing to have you just drop that off at my place. So we have after the Wallaces leave, and we have Billy that's outside, and we have a girl named Tracy who's taking everybody's photos, and Tracy takes the picture of the Wallace family because they're dirty. So we dirt. And we have at one point one of the Wallace kids takes a ball from Billy and is to be holding on to it. And the Wallace kids shame the kid by singing this Pumpkinhead song to give him back the ball. We have Tracy, who is to tell the kids to shut up so they will stop teasing this one kid. So we have Bunt, who is the oldest out of these, talking to these teens, but then they end up kind of going back in the truck. So we go on to have Ed, who is telling Billy to stay in the store no matter what, while he's going on to pick up the feed. So Billy ends up running off out of the store because Gypsy ends up running off, his dog. So Billy is to watch on as both Joel and Chris are doing these motorbike things, and so we of course have Billy that is to go on to realize that his dog has gotten loose and is kind of chasing uh, further into being close to these motorbikes, and so Billy runs after him. The one thing that I have problem with is like, what did these teens not realize that they should go on and just grab this kid and just be like, no, 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 like you're getting too close. Like we don't want you to get run over here, and that could have solved everything in this film. But no, this kid just starts running off, and so come to find out, the dirt bikes end up falling right on top of this kid, and so this kid ends up getting crushed, and so we immediately have Joel, who is trying to get his uh, motorcycle ready. He's trying to get into his car, and he's driving off to his cabin as quickly as possible because he's like, "Hey man, I'm not going down for murder, like, and I'm already drunk, so they're gonna like slap manslaughter or something on me. I'm gonna go to prison for the rest of my life." So Joel is rushing off here, and everybody's thinking about like, well, hey, there's no phones around. What can we do? Because of course this is not a time period where we have cell phones. So we're having these people who are all driving off, thinking like, well, we have a phone by the cabin, and so Steve is like, well, hey, I'll wait by the kid. You guys all go on to find the phone that's at the place that they're staying in. So Steve waits by to find Ed come back, and Ed is now looking at Steve, and then he looks at like Billy off in the distance. Ed runs off, picks up his kid. Steve is to mention to Ed that it's an accident, and Steve looks at or Ed looks at Steve and is like, "Ugh, like you piece of." So Ed gets in his car to try to like run off home to see if he can help his son back to health, realizing that Billy is going to die. I guess Ed doesn't even want to go to the hospital at this point because he realizes that this kid is going to die. So we have the teens go off to this cabin, and we have Tracy who is trying to pick up this phone to call the police, and come to find out Joel has ripped the phone cord out of the wall. So Tracy's like, well, hey, why did you do that? And Joel's like, I don't want to go to prison. So we then have Chris who comes in is kind of fight with the people here. Joel tries to defend Tracy and kind of pushes Joel. Joel grabs this log, smacks Chris off the side of the head, and both Chris and Tracy are both seen in this other room. So we have Ed that goes on to drop the feed off at Mr. Wallace because, again, he's still not going to the hospital with his son because he realizes his son's already dead. So Ed is now asking Mr. Wallace, like, hey, I know you know about a witch in these parts. Where is she? And Mr. Wallace is like, no. Like, I'm not going to tell you anything. Go home, bury your son. Leave it at that. So Ed starts to drive off, and Bunt is to tell Mr. Wallace where he can go on and find this witch. But he's not going to go the whole way with him, even though Ed desperately needs directions. Bunt is like, no, that witch gives me the willies. The willies! Anyways, so we have Ed that goes on to make it to this witch after Bunt is to jump off the side of the truck. So Ed goes on to have this body to make it to this witch, and the witch is the state who is Haggis. She's like, well, I don't do resurrections, so if that's what you're looking for me for, like, I don't have the power to do that. And Ed's like, no. Like, Ed is to be all aware of the ability of someone unleashing out a Pumpkinhead because he has seen it with his own eyes have it happen to someone in the past, and the whole flashbacky thing. So Ed is like, I want that. I want that to happen. So Haggis is like, well, okay, but I'm going to need something from you in return. You're going to need to go and do something. So Haggis tells Ed to go past the graveyard to the Pumpkin Patch graveyard, where it seems at one point there is to be this one grave where a number of people are all to bury unwanted kids. And so that's just kind of this random spot. So Haggis is telling Ed to dig up a person to give to her. And so he does. He retrieves this and gives this to her. And so all of a sudden, both Ed and Billy are going to have to be cut to have Haggis have blood from both of them to resurrect this Pumpkinhead. The Pumpkinhead then kind of resurrects and appears, and so this thing ends up getting sent out. So now we, of course, are to start to get some people getting killed. So the first one to drop is, I think we have a moment where Steve is going on and talking to Joel, and like Steve is going on and convincingly saying like, well, hey, maybe we should just run off to Mexico, maybe we should get out of here, like maybe that'll save Joel from being prosecuted, yada yada yada. So Joel leaves, and like Steve is to kind of hear a sound, so he follows it. Come to find out, that ends up getting Steve to get attacked and to be grabbed by the Pumpkinhead. And I'm assuming through most of this, we just have the Pumpkinhead who like takes everybody from these high distances or these trees and drops them. We don't really get to see that all that often in this movie. But we have Pumpkinhead who ends up just kind of having reasonably just Steve here, like, fall to the ground. We don't see his dead body again, but Joel is to see his dead, like, scarf that he had over his kind of neck. And Joel makes the assumption of, like, okay, Steve is dead. So, because we really don't get to, like, see the impact of what is going on here until Maggie and Kim are to be both quickly kind of taken and killed. So Ed is to go on and start seeing visions. And when Ed is to start to see visions, he is to have the same eyes as the Pumpkinhead. And every time he sees things. So we go on to have Ed, who is reconsidering what he has gone on and done. And so he talks to this witch and is to tell her, he's like, you know what, I think this was a massive mistake because I'm seeing these people all get killed and that's not what I wanted. And Haggis is like, well, you wanted revenge, right? And Ed is like, well, yeah, but not this way. And so Ed decides that he can't call this off, so he's going to go and help these teens. And Haggis is like, well, like, the thing's going to have to come after you anyways, because you're the last person that it's going to come for. So either way, like, you're going to die. So might as well just die, like, trying to do the right thing. So Ed runs off. So we end up getting Maggie, who ends up getting grabbed next in at her place. So Maggie ends up getting grabbed and she ends up getting clawed into her face. That's when Ed starts really seeing these visions kick in. So Maggie ends up getting tortured and killed, and so what happens with Maggie is she ends up getting dragged back into the home, and Kim ends up getting taken also, and here's where the rest of the teens are starting to realize what is even going on. So everybody is to start to get their guns and their weapons and chase after this thing because they don't really know clearly what's going on. And so by the time that they are to figure out where this Pumpkinhead is, they find the Pumpkinhead who has Kim up in this tree. And so the Pumpkinhead is to drop her from a pretty good distance. The fall kills her, and they're like, well, oh crap, there's nothing we could have done. So now we then go on to have Joel, Tracy, and we have Chris, who are all running off as everyone else is now dead besides Ed. So they're running off, and so Joel, Tracy, Chris are going through these homes, and they're desperately asking for people to help them. Like, hey, like, please help us, so on and so forth. So no one wants to help them because they know what's going on. They realize it. So we even have at one point where I think Tracy and the two other guys go on to find Mr. Wallace's house, and Mr. Wallace is like, "Oh no, 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 no! Like, you're not bringing that in there. We know what's going on. The Pumpkinhead has been sent out here, so we're not helping you." So Bunt is to find out that the Pumpkinhead is to be sent, and Bunt is to be talking to one of the Wallace kids and stating, like, maybe I caused this. Like, maybe I sent Ed out to do this. And so Bunt feels bad about it. And so he's like, well, maybe I can help these people, and maybe that'll kind of clear my conscience, or maybe it might haunt Bunt for the rest of his life. But either way, we have Bunt who doesn't get killed in this movie, so it kind of works out. So we have these guys running off, and they run into one of the hillmen who has this rifle, and We have this kind of this white dog here. So they get to this truck, and I think they end up trying to be tempted to commandeer this vehicle. Uh, but the Hillman goes on to tell the people to lower their weapons, and all of a sudden the Pumpkinhead ends up appearing, and Joel, I think, ends up trying to fire upon this Pumpkinhead, and Ed ends up coming in to try and save the teens, but ends up getting bitten by this dog because, of course, Ed is getting these visions of somebody again getting killed. So the dog looks at him and is like, "Oh my god! Like Ed is this monster. I'm gonna go and attack him." And Ed figures out a way to get rid of the dog. So Joel is trying to attack this Pumpkinhead, and what good does it do? Because this thing is unstoppable. So the Pumpkinhead is to go on and take this gun from, of course, Joel here and stab it into Joel's chest, killing him. So now we both have Tracy and Chris who are like, okay, F this, let's run off with Bunt. So come to find out they're thinking it's like, well, hey, like, let's just get out of here. Like, if we can't go on and find a home that'll save us from this thing, let's just like drive all night and get out of here. So we come to find out that Chris has this master plan of like, okay, let's get one of these motorcycles and let's just drive like heck. So Chris is getting one of these motorcycles ready, and he's trying to like, come on. So come to find out, Pumpkinhead has been prepared to have taken one of the chains out of the motorcycles, and that leads Chris going like, oh, and so, and I also realize I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so I'll clear something up later. So we have the Pumpkinhead who grabs Chris and the motorcycle and chucks them off to the side. And I think Chris, because of the impact of that, ends up getting killed. But before that, we had Bunt that was taking both Chris and Tracy to this church that at one point uh, was to have a congregation, but as you can see, the church is to have possibly burnt down, and but it's to possibly still count as holy ground. So Bond goes on to talk to these kids to try to confirm what his suspicions were, but then also Bunt is to tell his own story about what he has heard about the people from this town. So after they're done kind of swapping stories, we have the Pumpkinhead who arrives at this church and is starting to make his way through. He ends up seeing this cross, so he destroys this religious symbol and then carries on. So that ends up having Chris rush to this motorcycle. The impact of his death, or the impact of this fall, kills him. I'm assessing. Um, or otherwise, maybe he just broke his leg and the Pumpkinhead probably killed him off screen. We're not sure. People can confirm by watching the film. Yeah, I think it was dead. No, I don't think it was dead. I think it was just knocked out. Oh, okay, all right. Maybe the whole goal wasn't really to kill Chris. I don't know. So we then turn around and have Tracy and Bunt that are just running around, leading them all the way back to Ed's farm because Ed is to re-meet up with Tracy and Bunt here. So Ed's master plan is to figure out a way to just burn this thing alive. And why not do that by having a flamethrower? And honestly, I just recently saw a movie where someone, I think it was Zombie Apocalypse movie that I recently reviewed, where one guy is to ask about, like, well, hey, like, why not just put a flamethrower to a zombie? And the guy ends up stating, it's like, well, think about it. if you put a flamethrower to a zombie, then you'll just find a zombie that is now on fire chasing after you. Like, do you want that? And it's still alive, it's still coming after you. And so the guy's like, well, I guess not. It's like, yeah. So think about that for anything. Like a monster that, of course, is on fire is still a monster that's on fire and can come and take you down with it. So, yeah. Uh, unless you want to fall on that sword. So, we have Ed going on to put this flamethrower onto his back, and Ed is to accidentally fall right into this pitchfork and stab himself into the arm and into the chest. We have Ed realizing as he goes on and does that, as the Pumpkinhead approaches, that the Pumpkinhead is to all of a sudden weirdly feel this impact. The Pumpkinhead starts adjusting his arm, and Ed's like, wait a minute, what? So Ed is to realize that he needs to go on and kill himself to kill the monster. So Ed is grabbing this gun and is trying to shoot himself in the head. That doesn't work out like he thought it would. So Ed, excuse me, is to have dropped this gun right in front of him, and Tracy's out there with the Pumpkinhead and Ed in between her. So Ed tells Tracy to kill him, and so Tracy grabs the gun and just does so. And so that not only kills Ed, but kills Pumpkinhead. So the last thing that we see after this, and the one thing that I forgot about, but now I can kind of put in here, we had Billy that goes on to give Ed this meaningful necklace. And Billy's like, well, hey, you can kind of wear it whenever you want. And Ed's like, I'll wear it all the time. So, come to find out, Haggis, the witch, is to go on and bury this body into this grave. And come to find out, the necklace that this thing is wearing is the same exact necklace that Ed, of course, was wearing. So, we'd have to assess or assume that Ed either could go on to be the next Pumpkinhead, or that maybe somehow Ed is to weirdly get resurrected and maybe be the hero of other films. Not quite sure. I don't know how all the other sequels or whatever go. There's probably a Pumpkinhead fan out there. It's like, oh yeah, I know exactly how the thing rolls out. Blah, blah, blah. And like, oh okay, cool. But I think with that said, I think I'm just going to wrap this one up because I think that's all I have left to say. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot to state for this film. I know there was certain times where I wasn't clear about how deaths were to happen. But with this movie being so thin on story, it's kind of like, okay, like we really just have so many scenes where Pumpkinhead just grabs people and chucks them to their deaths. And like that's how everyone just kind of quickly gets thinned out in this movie. There's very little unique deaths here, so everybody just gets like thrown from trees or gets bashed into something, or there's not really much specifics about how everyone dies. It's all the same. So with that said, again, goodbye everybody. Goodbye everybody.